Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani here. Welcome to the Candida Summit. I have the honor of hosting this interview with my good friend and colleague, Evan Brand. Everyone knows Evan here. 6 million downloads, internationally based functional medicine expert. You can reach him via phone and Skype. He specializes in digestive issues, chronic infections, obesity, fatigue. He's had his own issues with IBS and mood issues, and he's been able to overcome it with a functional medicine approach that gets to the root cause. Evan also has a couple of books, The Stress Solution, REM Rehab, does lots of stuff on nootropics as well. And again, you can always get a hold of Evan, schedule a complimentary consult at evanbrand.com. See if you're a good fit for the next step. But Evan, how are we doing, man? Really happy to be connected.
Hey man, thank you so much. We have had hundreds of hours of fun together over the last few years. So of course, there's no one else that I would want to be interviewed by than yours truly. So thank you for the opportunity.
So excited to be here. So let's talk about Candida. So Candida is one of these things where it's like, oh, back in the 70s and 80s, it's like, oh, the yeast connection. Oh, is Candida causing all my problems? And it's interesting because we talk about this a lot on air where Candida a lot of times can be connected with other types of infection. So I'm just curious, how often are you seeing in your patients just a pure Candida issue that's driving the problems, or is Candida there with other types of infections that you're seeing?
Yeah, great question. I'd say maybe 5% of the time it's Candida by itself.
Yeah.
And if I even see it that 5% of the time, I'm thinking, okay, something must have gotten missed, because the other 95% of the time, it's a Giardia issue. It's a crypto issue like what I had going on when I had Candida problems personally. And of course, adrenal issues are always happening. Thyroid issues can be happening. So if somebody just has Candida, it's like, okay, something's weird or you just got lucky, because it usually never happens that way.
Yeah, I see the same thing as well clinically. And some people, Candida can be a big issue. There's something called the auto brewery syndrome. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, it's basically where you're getting drunk, right, on your own Candida.
Yeah, part of the metabolites of Candida is acetaldehyde, and that acetaldehyde basically goes to your liver and is a stressor, kind of like alcohol is.
Yeah, well, the good thing is we can fix the yeast, and then we can use other things to soak it up too. I've been using some of those fulvic acid supplements that we spoke about to try to suck it up. And basically, any type of a binder, like your clays or your fulvic acids, these binders, you can kind of soak up the aldehyde, which is cool, because if you are getting drunk on your own Candida, that's not the root cause, a deficiency of clay or charcoal. But if that can help you get 10% better while we work on fixing the other issues, that's a win.
And I see a lot of Candida people that have a Candida overgrowth, they also end up developing like neurological or mood issues. What's your experience with patients with Candida and mood or brain or cognitive issues?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, that was me, right? I always like to talk about me first, just because I like to tell people, hey, look, I've already been there, done that. I've struggled, I've suffered. I feel like, and I know you would agree too, that as a practitioner, it's much, much better if you have dealt with the exact same problem that you're working with your clients on, as opposed to you got some of these medical doctors where they're prescribing drugs that they would never take themselves. They're prescribing statins and beta blockers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people may say, well, they might not need those drugs. If they're a cardiologist, they might not need a heart rhythm drug. But in our space, you and I take everything that we've recommended for people. We take our own herbs, we formulate our own supplements, we take our own fish oils, we take our own anti-parasitics if we show up with parasites. So back to the original question about the mood issues. I mean, I dealt with depression for probably 10 years, if not more. Like, the more and more that I do interviews, I realize that even as a kid and as a teenager, I was depressed, and I still had a great childhood, but I just wonder if it goes back to something when I was very, very young. Like, you talk with Dr. Diedrich Klinghardt, and he says that, traumatic experiences even before age 2 can cause issues later in life. It's like, well, I have no idea what happened before age 2. So I just wonder if something like that happened, to where a roll of the dice led me to be more depressed. And then, of course, my parents, they struggle a lot with depression on both sides. So, of course, the genetic, epigenetic component is part of it. And then the infections. I mean, you were the first guy who looked at me and you said, dude, I guarantee you've got gut bugs, because you saw old pictures of me and I had a lot more muscle than I did when you saw me. You're like, dude, what happened to your muscle strength? I was like, I don't know. And you're like, okay, you need to run a stool test on yourself. And that's when I had ran some comprehensive stuff and found out I had gut bugs. And that was the answer I was looking for, because my mental health was affected. It wasn't just the gut. It wasn't just the weight loss. It was the insomnia, which leads to
Totally.
brain fog because you're tired. And then the brain fog leads to anxiety because you can't focus. So then you're anxious that you can't get your work done. And your boss is like, hey, this project is due. Where's it at? And you can't do it because your brain's not working. So, I mean, Candida can be a massive, massive health issue. And it's not something that I think people should just write a blog about 10 ways to fix Candida. It doesn't work that way. You can't just throw a bunch of stuff at this with a shotgun approach and get good results. I'm literally probably going to make t-shirts one day that have the term supplement graveyard on there, because every person I talk with, they tell me they love that term that I use, because
Oh
I
yeah.
have a supplement graveyard, and they usually do too, of supplements they tried but that they didn't follow through with.
100%. And what's the mechanism of candida and yeast and fungus? And just for the listeners, right? We have like the big umbrella is fungus, right? And then we have yeast is like a various, type of fungus underneath that umbrella. And candida is in one of those kind of yeast families. What's the mechanism of candida or these yeast causing neurological and brain and cognitive issues?
I would say there's multiple mechanisms. One, which is something that Dan Kalish and I chatted about, is mitochondria being affected.
Yeah.
So that can affect the energy levels because you've got the toxins that are being created by the yeast. You talked about like the brewery syndrome.
Yep.
And so that's affecting the mitochondria. That's affecting the liver too. So if we've got a lot of things in the gut, like parasites and bacteria plus the candida, the liver's overburdened. So now the liver's having a backup, so to speak, and that can cause fatigue. And then, of course, that fatigue can lead to depression, possibly anxiety, then sleep issues. For me, I had terrible sleep issues when my liver was overburdened because I had so many bugs. I would say another mechanism too would just be the malabsorption that candida is causing, because you and I run a lot of organic acids testing. And when we look at our clients' lab results, we see the amino acids are very low, meaning they're not digesting their proteins well. We see their neurotransmitters low. So we'll look at markers like HVA, which is called homovanillate. You and I talk about that all the time, which is a dopamine marker. And we see neurotransmitters drop too. So now the person has lack of energy. They have lack of drive. They can't focus. They have lack of concentration. They're easily bored. And this is because their neurotransmitters are not being produced. Then we see serotonin being low. That's another mechanism of the yeast, because most of it's produced in the gut. And if the gut is in a state of dysbiosis, meaning you've got bad guys that have moved into the neighborhood, all the good guys are being crowded out, you can't manufacture neurotransmitters like you're supposed to. So when serotonin's low, then you've got the irritability, you've got the panic, you've got the phobias, you've got the sugar cravings, you've got mood swings, winter depression, PMS. And so just to summarize, I would say the mechanism is affecting the liver because of the toxins. I would say it's affecting mitochondria because of the toxins. It's creating a permeable gut barrier. So it's creating leaky gut, which is causing malabsorption. So even if you're eating an organic paleo template, which is what we kind of promote, and let's say your brain chemistry is the other mechanism that's affected.
Yeah, 100%. And there's one toxin that's actually produced by the candida. So you have candida, which then produces the acid aldehyde. The acid aldehyde produces a toxin, a neurotoxin called salsolinol. And that salsolinol can make its way up to the midbrain and actually start killing off some of these dopamine producing cells in the substantia nigra.
Spell that.
So yeah, the compound is sal, SALSOLINOL, salsolinol. And that's synthesized from acid aldehyde and can affect the dopamine producing cells in the brain, in the midbrain, in the substantia nigra. So that's another mechanism, because dopamine is really important for focus. It's really important for mood. It's that reward center neurotransmitter that gets secreted, during happy moments, and is important for focus too, right? People that are trying to go on these antidepressants are using that. So that's another mechanism too.
You know what's crazy too? That salsolinol, I'm just reading a little article here. It says it's a metabolic product of fermentation found in small amounts in several foods, most notably chocolate. And it's believed to be the addictive component of chocolate and alcohol. That's pretty interesting. I didn't know about the link between chocolate and alcohol and this compound.
Exactly. And then my thing with Candida as well, maybe you've experienced it, but so many conventional medical doctors, they really poo poo it. They really put it down like it's some like thing that's just not real. Even when we have data like Candida via a GI map test or Candida antibodies or diarabinitol via an organic acid test. What's your experience with that?
Yeah. Well, I had two medical docs that are both gastroenterologists on the summit. So Ken Brown joined us, and then um, Partha Nandi joined us, and they both admitted that the tide has turned, or at least is turning in the conventional gastroenterology world, and that now when they go to like conventional medical doctor conferences, Candida is being brought up as well as leaky gut. When they're saying like 5 years ago, even leaky gut was laughed at. And of course, Candida was laughed at too. So those are at least two guys who give me hope that, hey, maybe this is going to turn the tide. But I mean, every single week, countless times, you and I both hear the same story, which is that the conventional doctors laughed at them. And if they talk about using herbs to treat something like Candida or parasites or bacteria, which is something we specialize in, that they basically get laughed at and say, good luck. And then they send them our way. And that's 95% of the people. I always ask this question to every new client. When's the last time you saw a medical doctor? If they have an answer to that question, usually the answer is in a negative way, meaning I went to the doctor, I didn't get the answer I was looking for. Now that's why I ended up at your door, which is crazy because I'm not a medical doctor, but yet I'm giving people far better success rates because we're looking at root causes. We're not just throwing antibiotics or diflucan at them and saying, have a good day.
Yeah, it's really interesting how much treatment by conventional medical doctors is driven by acceptance from peers or just maybe what the so-called best practices are, right? The problem is in conventional medicine, it takes 20 years to get research into the curriculum. So it takes so long for these people to even interject new information. I mean, you go into conventional dermatologist office, they'll have the typical handout that even says diet does not affect skin or breakouts or acne, but we know that diet is a massive direct cause. Anyone that's changed their diet will notice their skin probably clear up the first time. So it's interesting as functional medicine docs, we're really driving our protocols and our treatment based on results. Non-dogmatic, let's get the patient better. The results are what matters. We don't need to wait 10 or 20 years for a research study to tell us that we're on the right track.
Agreed. Yeah. My wife, I mean, she had so many skin issues and it was all tied into probably a candida problem, but her skincare products too. And people may say, well, is this a tangent that you're going on? Yeah, a little bit. And it's because I want people to think about the other pieces of this puzzle. So it's like if you just focus on the yeast, you're probably not going to get the results. Like you could take all the oregano oil, all the olive leaf, all the caprylic acid that you want, and you may fix some of the issue, but for me, I had parasites and H. pylori, which is a bacterial infection. I don't think many people have talked much about H. pylori, so I guess let's give the audience a little bit of info about it. It's a bacterial infection. Estimated 50% of the world's population has H. pylori, and what it does is it damages the parietal cells in the stomach, which secrete HCl, hydrochloric acid, which is your stomach acid. And what that causes is the stomach to become more alkaline. So the pH is increasing, meaning now you can't digest your proteins. So your grass-fed beef and your pastured meats and your chicken and all these good things that you're eating, you can no longer digest those. So then you get rotting and putrefying food in the gut, which then creates a leaky gut situation that creates fermentation, which feeds bacterial overgrowth, which then feeds candida. So all that being said, you can still fix the gut, have terrible skincare products, and then have terrible skin, which is what my wife had. She was basically covered in hives and she went to like 5 dermatologists. And guess what? They all just gave her steroids and she'd put the topical steroid on and then it would get better for a week and then it would get worse again. And so we knew something was up in the gut and then we knew something was up externally. We cleaned both parts up and then all of a sudden her skin's been perfect. And
That's
me
great.
too. I mean, uh, probably maybe 2013, 14, 15, whenever it was, several years ago when you and I first started talking together, you were like, man, I bet something's going on in your gut because I was having breakouts on my chin. And no matter what I did, my diet was super clean. I think I did have some raw cheese in there and I did have to pull out the raw dairy, unfortunately. Luckily, I do butter now, and that's my only source of dairy. So I do okay with butter. But cheeses, they had to go. And you're like, look, man, I bet something's going on food wise or gut wise. And you were right on both counts. It was the raw cheese, even though it was grass fed, hand picked by the Amish in a beautiful field on the mountaintop. No, I don't know. It was, it was the highest quality I could find, but it didn't matter because I had gut bugs and that dairy, that undigested casein proteins. Not only was it addicting because it's similar to gluten where it's addicting, you get these morphine-like compounds, you hit the opiate receptors with undigested dairy and gluten. So those had to be pulled out of the diet for the addictive property reason, but then also it was feeding the yeast that I had.
Totally. That makes so much sense. And, big thing that I noticed too growing up, I had lots of yeast. I mean, I had chronic athlete's foot. I mean, I would literally remember like in bed, like being like 8, 9, 10, and I would like scratch my toes. I'd like take one toe and like scratch the top of the other toe until I bled. And I
Ooh.
remember I was just chronically doing that throughout my whole childhood.
Was
So
that antibiotics or what led to that for you to be so young and have yeast?
I mean, I think it's just the combination of antibiotic usage. I had chronic ear infections, literally 6 or 7 every year. By the way, since I've cut and cleaned out my diet, I've had 0 ear infections for 15 years. And I'm in Lake Austin every week, water skiing, and I have all kinds of potential bacteria getting in there, not any ear infections at all. So that was a huge component. The other one is I had a ton of rosacea growing up. And I find rosacea and fungus has a massive correlation. You cut out rosacea, and rosacea just like when your skin just gets really red and flushed. And when I clean the diet up and cut the fungus out, I notice the rosacea significantly improve.
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
know too, if we go back to some of your pictures or videos from a couple of years ago, you can see your skin had a more reddish hue, and you can see that's cleared up too.
Yeah, it's definitely much, much better. Now, I still occasionally get a pimple here and there, and it's probably because I touch my face. If I touch my face, if I'm sitting here thinking, I've got my hand on my cheek or my chin or something. But I'll tell you, man, my skin is probably 90% better, and it was
has.
already 100% better from when I was a teenager. So, like, I had exponentially increased my skin health, and I still had a little bit of acne, and I just accepted it as normal. And see, I think that's something I want to kind of divert the conversation to is that many people accept their condition and they modify their lifestyle to appeal to that condition. So if you have back pain, maybe you're more sedentary because you don't want to hurt your back, so you don't exercise. If you have depression, maybe you don't go out in public because you're depressed and you don't want to make friends. If you have anxiety, I had a woman as a client who she didn't drive on the highway because every time she got on the highway, she would have panic attacks. And so many people modify their disease. Or women, they get acne and their face is covered in cystic acne and bad, deep, the pizza face, they call it, but they just put more makeup on and they're modifying their lifestyle, more makeup. They're avoiding social situations. Or think about belly fat, with Candida. So many women are concerned about their weight. So I don't want that topic to go ignored. If you have that Candida belly, that big donut belly, they'll just put on black clothes or they'll put on a flowy dress instead of a tight dress. And then they don't feel as sexy. So it's like, look, stop sabotaging yourself. If you just get to the root of all this, you don't have to wear as much makeup. You don't have to wear black. You don't have to wear a flowy dress to hide the belly. Like, you can fix all of these issues. And for me, I never wear makeup, but I got to the point where I thought, oh, okay, this is just Evan. I'm just a guy who's going to have X amount of acne always on my face. Nope, not anymore.
I love it, man. So much value. I listen to so many summits and so many people, they just talk about fluff, fluff, fluff. And you listen to someone for an hour and you're like, okay, I heard a lot of stuff, but like, what's the take home? Like, what am I going to do now? And then you walk away being like, kind of paralyzed. Okay, I heard some stuff, but what the heck do I do? So off the bat, just kind of summarizing, we know that Candida and these type of fungal overgrowths have massive effect on the skin. We know it has effect on the immune system through leaky gut. As you make the gut more permeable, food can get into the bloodstream and create autoimmune issues. We know that the acid aldehyde can make its way up to the brain and create mood issues, also become a stress on the liver, and then also can create other toxins like salsolinol. And we know that energy issues as well, because let's talk about that, because doesn't Candida also eat up a lot of B vitamins too?
Well, I would say Candida plus the other bugs too, right? Because as we mentioned in the beginning, it's rarely Candida by itself. But yeah, if we want to just simplify, yeah, you could say Candida, but every time we look at an organic acids panel, almost always there's some level of B vitamins being low, whether it's
Yeah.
B2, which is the riboflavin, whether it's your B6, which is important for converting serotonin into melatonin, which is
Yeah.
why so many people have sleep issues because the Candidas rob them of their B6. Now they can't convert serotonin. So even if they take 5-HTP to try to help sleep and serotonin, if they don't have the B6 component, they don't sleep well. So yeah, B vitamins get robbed. We talked about amino acids being robbed, talk about neurotransmitters being low, and just the fact that you feel like crap when you have Candida because then you're driven by sugar cravings. I mean, I'll tell you, I remember the point where I couldn't go more than a few hours without eating. And there's an adrenal component to that too, which I think we should mention and address here, which is that when you have gut stress, which could just be Candida or could be other bugs, your adrenals are stressed because the liver is stressed and the adrenals have to come in to try to pinch hit, as you call it, to help out the liver. So the adrenal glands get involved. You're secreting cortisol, and that cortisol is further affecting blood sugar because then the pancreas has to get involved. So that's this whole system of pancreas, adrenals, and liver. If there's liver stress, the adrenals have to come in. If there's
Right.
adrenal stress, the pancreas has to come in and try to help out with insulin regulation. So long story short, I was a mess. I was a triangle mess. I had pancreas, therefore blood sugar problems, liver problems, therefore detox problems. I was getting headaches all the time. I was exhausted, and then adrenal problems. I had heart palpitations. I had problems falling asleep, problems staying asleep, and it was this whole triad, and it all stemmed from the gut. So long story short, I told you before we jumped on this call, I said, hey, let's make sure that we talk about putting together a Candida protocol for
Yes.
somebody. So let's talk about that.
So hold on. Let me just,
Yeah.
because I think that's the end stage.
Yeah.
But let's go a little bit deeper to how to figure out you even have Candida to begin with first.
Okay.
So
Good.
I'm gonna pitch you over kind of the lab test that you do and we do to detect this stuff. But we have some clinical symptoms, right? We have tinea versicolor, which is kind of like a fungal rash. You can just do a Google image of it and you can get a sense of what that looks like. Again, Google image will give you the most severe pictures and tends to be in the worst body parts on Google, but at least gives you a pretty good idea. You have obviously jock itch, right? You have tinea capitis or cradle cap or seborrheic dermatitis, right? Those dandruff, those type of things. You have athlete's foot. I mentioned the jock itch. Those are going to be like your big clinical indicators on the skin. You have thrush or just a gentle white coating in the mouth or on the tongue. I'd say those would be some of the key clinical indicators, things that you physically see in an exam outside of labs. Is there anything else clinically that you wanted to add there?
I would say the fingernails, right? My
Yep.
fingernails.
Oh, yes.
I showed up with itches with fingernails. So it could be little white spots, like little white flecks, but could be vertical ridging, vertical lines. And I can actually feel it's much, much better than it used to be, but I can actually feel the vertical ridges on my nails. So guys, look down, girls, look down. If you have fake nails, take them off. Look at your ridges. If you have vertical ridges, that's a sign you've got malabsorption.
Absolutely.
We've got to figure out why. We've got to figure out why. Is it Candida? Probably.
And I think you also want to mention is that slight yellowish hue on the fingernail or on the toenail. And that's super helpful too. And we can talk later about how we address that because sometimes those will not go away even with the diet and the gut stuff because it's so far removed from the body. But we'll add that to the end. All right, good. So we hit the clinical indicators. Let's go into the lab test. I know there's a couple different body secretions you measure. Urine with organic acid, stool with some of the gut testing, and also maybe you even do blood too. But let's go break that down.
Yeah, so the stool testing for Candida specifically, it's not very accurate. And I actually, we talked about this a little bit during Kalish's interview. He kind of brought something interesting up, which I'm going to go ahead and just mock what he said because it makes sense and it seems to correlate with the symptoms, is that when he sees that the stool test doesn't show Candida, but it does on the urine, that he considers it a much worse overgrowth, which I think it seems kind of counterintuitive. It's like, okay, the stool missed it, which it commonly does, but then the urine finds it. I thought, okay, that's just Candida. But he's saying he thinks when the stool doesn't find it at all, that it's more systemic. Therefore, it's not showing up in the stool because it's more in the bloodstream. And therefore, it's a worse overgrowth. So I thought that was a cool little caveat that I've added to my brain because most of the time, 95% of the time, the Candida shows negative on the GI map stool test, which is what you and I utilize. But the 95% of the time that it doesn't show there, it does show on the urine organic acids panel. There's a whole section dedicated to yeast and fungal markers that we look at. There's carboxycitric acid, there's
Yeah.
citric acid, there's the arabinitol or the arabinose, which is the gas that Candida
Yeah.
produces. You've got tartaric acid, which is
Tartaric.
another one.
Yep.
And we look at these, and that's like measuring the tailpipe. So when you take your car in for emissions testing, we're measuring the tailpipe of your body, which is the urine, and we're saying, hey, look, here's the metabolite, here's the breakdown product, meaning Candida's in there, and it broke down into this organic acid, and we found it in the urine. So there's your 100% proof that it's there.
Love it. That is absolute knowledge bomb. So I do like that. I do see the D-arabinitol, like on an organic test, is a really good indication of systemic, because it's looking kind of metabolically what's happening throughout the body, especially if we missed it in the gut. I had about 4 patients this week where it missed it in the gut test, but then it came back in the urine test. So that's good to note. I also see other types of yeast in some of these testing, like Microsporidium or Geotrichum. What's your experience with other types of yeast outside of Candida? Do you feel like Candida is the more virulent or evasive species? What's your take?
Well, I would say Candida is definitely more common.
Yeah.
And I do see the Microsporidia, which it's funny because it's in the fungus category, but when you do research on it, it comes up being a parasite too. So it's almost like it's a parasite and a fungus. I don't know. Microsporidia is a weird one. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that people that have yeast issues tend to be more Candida based, and I know Candida albicans is the one that's been researched the most. But if we see another type of yeast like a Microsporidium, we're going to treat it just the same. I don't really alter my yeast programs any different. We're going to still knock it out.
Agreed.
And I see a lot of these yeast issues combined with H. pylori, and it makes sense because H. pylori alters stomach acid. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I mean it's huge. That's what I had, right? And that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier is that when the H. pylori does the damage to your parietal cells, you're not making stomach acid, so then the food rots and putrefies, and that fermentation process in the gut feeds Candida, where a normal commensal amount of Candida becomes an overgrowth level. So yeah, I would say in the order of dominoes, like chicken or egg, I would say H. pylori could absolutely come first, and then Candida overgrowth could follow. And same thing with proton pump inhibitors. Let's just take the H. pylori out of the picture and say somebody that was put on an acid blocking medication because they had heartburn. That would also lead to a pretty systemic yeast overgrowth. And I second your thoughts. The Geotrichum, the Microsporidia, these other type of fungi and yeast that we see, I don't modify the protocol at all because a lot of the herbs that are used for these protocols, they're pretty cool. They're pretty comprehensive. They're going to knock out parasites, bacteria, yeast, kind of all in one fell swoop. So we really don't have to do something different. If we see Candida plus Geotrichum, it's something that we can just keep the same. We want to test, don't guess, which is the whole philosophy behind this is, look, maybe you've got all those symptoms, but wouldn't you rather test yourself first with these functional medicine tests that we're talking about rather than building up your supplement graveyard even further and buying supplements that you've heard, but you don't really know if you need them? And now herbs are 1,000 times safer than antibiotics, but it is true that we can kill some beneficial bacteria in the gut, especially in like really, really young kids and toddlers and infants where their immune system isn't formed. You might not want to throw a bunch of heavy oregano oil at a 2-year-old kid that we're working with. So get the test first, because then you're going to be much more specific in terms of the options for the treatment.
Phenomenal. Excellent. And then I know it's when people find out they have some type of critter or foreign entity inside of their digestive tract, they want to knock it out right away. And I find so many people, they're going after gut issues, but they haven't had the foundational things in alignment. They haven't had the hormonal support, the nutrient support, and the anti-inflammatory support on board. So when they go after these critters, they start feeling worse. Can you talk about how you sequence care or treatment when you go after these gut bugs, especially Candida?
Yep, well said. And first, I just want to give credit where credit's due. I thank you so much for all the mentorship that you've given me over the last several years, because a lot of this education I had to learn the hard way, and that was by you helping me to create my own protocols to work on myself. And then I took that knowledge that you've taught me and put it into my clients. So
That's
just
great.
want
Thank you.
to pause and say, hey, look, you're the man. Thank you. And regarding the level of care that you're providing and the order of care that you're providing, that's huge. If you go to a quote unquote gut expert, they may just focus on just the gut. If you go to just a Lyme disease expert, you're going to get diagnosed with Lyme, and every issue that you have is related to Lyme. Headaches, it's
100%.
Lyme. Fatigue, it's Lyme. Joint pain, it's Lyme. And it may not be. It may be rheumatoid arthritis caused from a Prevotella infection, which is an autoimmune trigger that we see, or a Proteus mirabilis infection, which is a bacteria that we see. For example, in rheumatoid arthritis patients, you can look at the research on this, 75% of people with new onset rheumatoid arthritis have a Prevotella infection, which is an autoimmune trigger that you and I see on stool tests every single week.
Also the mycoplasma infection too.
Yeah, mycoplasma, which my wife had, and she had bad joint pain from. So long story short.
And when we knocked the mycoplasma out, what happened to her joint pain?
Her joint pain's gone.
Gone. That's it.
She's so much better. So the point I was getting at here is that, you and I, what we do is kind of like a specialty in its own, right? Like functional medicine, and the type of functional medicine that we're creating and using with our clients is very, very specialized. But at the same time, we're generalist in the sense that we're not going to say everything is Lyme. We're not going to say everything's your gut. We're not going to say everything is the thyroid if you're a thyroid expert, or if you're an adrenal expert. We're not going to say everything's adrenals. We have to look at all of it. And that's something that I really credit to you teaching me that, because if you go too hard into a gut protocol, what happens is you start to get more fatigued. You may have die-off reactions or Herxheimer reactions, which in my opinion, like the longer I do this, I'm starting to believe that Herxheimer's are like a myth, or not a myth, but that it shouldn't happen. Like if you design a good protocol, which would involve supporting the adrenals, sometimes we have to support the adrenals for a month before we even go into the gut protocol. If that person is too weak, the last thing you want to do is start a war. Like, I mean, yeah. Totally. you have such great analogies. So let me try to mock your skills with this. If we're going into the Civil War and we've got, 50 guys on the Confederate side, and we've got, 5,000 guys on the North, that's a if you're the Confederates, you've got a bad chance of winning. If you've only got 50 guys left and then the North has 5,000, like you're toast. And so why would you want to go into battle against those guys until you've built up your reserves? So in this analogy, building up your adrenals are the reserves. You've got to have the adrenals, the backup generators for your energy production, to come in and rebuild your army. So then you can go into battle when it's a more fair battle. Once the army's strong, once the adrenals are on board, and we're supporting that with the use of adaptogenic herbs, things like ashwagandha. I'm a huge fan of albizia bark, which comes from the mimosa tree. Yeah, I love it. Motherwort.
That came from mimosa. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Motherwort has been a huge favorite for me. Blue vervain has been something I've been using a lot the last couple months. And then, of course, our standards that many people talk about: reishi mushroom, cordyceps mushroom, rhodiola can be great. Be careful if you're bipolar or manic depressive. Rhodiola can exacerbate it.
Okay, good to know.
Schisandra, love Schisandra berry extract. There's also, oh God, what else could I mention? Eleuthero, which is Siberian ginseng. Licorice I use not too commonly because a lot of people have blood pressure issues, and licorice long-term could elevate that just a bit. I play with licorice, but for me, it's personally too stimulating, so I don't use much of it. I focus more on the other herbs, and especially because so many people in our society are fatigued, but they're tired and wired, and they have anxiety. So that's why I generally start with the more calming things, like the albizia, the ziziphus, which is a seed. Ziziphus seed is pretty cool. To say. Yeah, isn't it? Nice. Motherwort, which is cool, and then the ashwagandha, which I do pretty much every day. I pretty much stay on adaptogens, and Kalish kind of called me out. He goes, "Well, you're cheating. You need to fix your lifestyle."
Oh, right there, ashwagandha, baby, love it.
Good. Kalish is like, "Evan, you're cheating, because you're just taking the adaptogens." And then I said, "Well, I've got a little baby at home," and he goes, "Oh, okay. Well, that's a special circumstance. You deserve the adaptogens." I was like, "Okay, good." But anyway,
I think the adaptogens are great. There's a lot of long-term research on that. I know Dr. Stephen Buhner talks about ashwagandha as being one of those adaptogens that you can take long-term, which is great. I love that.
Yeah, it's funny though, because he called me out and he's like, "Evan, you're just using that as a crutch so that you can work 5 days a week when you should only be working 3 days a week." So that was funny. And I agree, but you and I, we love the hustle. We love the grind. We love helping people. So I'm so driven that I use the adaptogens to help keep me going. And I do have a baby at home, and she wakes us up at night, and my sleep pattern, my circadian rhythm is not perfect. So I use the adaptogens in that manner. But back to the story of Candida, adrenal support always should be on board because it is a stress. Now, it's a good stress, but still stress to kill off these gut infections. So that's why adrenals need to be on board. And then we spoke about the liver support too. So if we were kind of piecing something together, like step 1, 2, 3, or maybe options 1, 2, 3, A, B, C that should be in place, I would say adrenals is at the top. And
Yeah.
then secondly is the gut support. And then usually the gut support has liver support added. And then
Yep.
inside of that, we could also talk about some mitochondrial support. If we see
Yeah.
that there's mitochondrial dysfunction, we could do creatine, ribose, carnitine, CoQ10,
Right.
PQQ, other nutrients to fuel mitochondria so the
Yep.
energy levels can hurry up. Now, if you support adrenals, you support liver, you're giving like N-acetylcysteine, milk thistle, kind of taking the load off the liver, you can start producing more glutathione from your liver on your own to help detox improve. But we may need to throw in extra detox support. So you and I talk a lot about the binders, like the clays, the charcoals, the stuff like that to help pull stuff out. We'll go back to the war analogy. If you've got the field, and I think Kalish used the same analogy, but something along the lines of if the battlefield is full of all these dead bodies, all these dead bugs, but you don't support the liver and the gallbladder to get the dead bodies out of the field, you become overburdened. So it's kind of like maybe if you had a water hose, but the golf ball was stuck at the end of the hose, and then you turn on the hose, which is you killing all the bugs and trying to flush them out, but the detox and drainage pathways are toast and they're not open at the end of the hose, it's not going to work. And then you start like feeling worse. And then your practitioner says, "Oh, a Herxheimer reaction's good. You're getting better. Keep pushing forward." It's like, no. I disagree. I think that means something's overburdened. You're too weak. You're creating too many toxins. You can't keep up. You need sauna, or you need an Epsom salt bath, or you need something, or you need to take less herbs or less intensity, or you need to shorten the duration of the herbs. If your body is screaming at you saying, no, 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 don't keep pushing forward. That's silly. That's like being on the train going across the bridge and then the track like disappears. It's like, I want to make
100%.
sure.
Yeah, 100%. And just to kind of echo a couple of things that you just said, number one, if we have a lot of infectious debris inside of our gut that we're killing off, that could easily overwhelm our body. So if we sequence care the right way with the adrenals and all the diet stuff first, that's going to reduce inflammation. And when you have less inflammation, cells don't stick together as much. They don't agglutinate, so they can move in the lymphatic system better and move out your body. And think of the lymphatic system as it's the interplay between the blood and the tissue. So as things die, we kind of have to get them into the they go into the blood, they go into the lymph, and ideally we excrete them out, whether it's stool or in our, typically stool or in our urine. So we have to make sure those pathways are moving, but the more inflamed we are, the more those cells stick together and agglutinate and become really stagnant and sludgy. And that increases stress on our detoxification pathways. And the longer those toxins are there, it stresses out our immune system. So one of the things I wanted to highlight, and then we'll go back to treatment issues, is a lot of patients, they come in there and they kill things out too fast or too hard. So my instruction to patients is go taper it up if you have a lot of die-off issues. And a lot of times it's going to be fatigue, malaise, achy joints, headaches, or just an intensification of the symptoms you already currently have. You either, number one, slow down, decrease the dose, take the herbs with food. If it's really bad, we do a supplement holiday for half a week to a week, add it back in, throw some ginger and binders in. And I always just tell patients, make sure you can tolerate it. If there's a tiny bit of die-off and it's not affecting your life, fine. But if not, you got to follow that die-off reaction protocol to calibrate the dosage and add in more binding support. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's excellent. And so many people that we work with, they've already been to 20 practitioners before they get to us. So generally speaking, they're pretty sick. So you and I kind of have to tiptoe sometimes with people, and that's fine. It takes a little bit of work. It takes extra brain power for us to tiptoe and handhold these clients. But look, if you're listening to this, I'm guessing you've already done something and it hasn't worked, which is why you're here listening to us. And, between the two of us, we've worked with thousands and thousands of people at this point, and so many that we've lost count. And what I'm finding is that people are sicker and sicker that are coming to us, and we have to baby step this. And for me, I'm pretty sensitive. So if somebody tells you take 4 capsules of something, that's the full dose, I'm going to start with 1, and I'm going to stick with 1 capsule for a few days. And then maybe on day 3 or 4, you bump up to 2 capsules and you stick with that for a few days. And then you go up to 3. And then
Yes.
maybe 2 weeks later, now you're at the full therapeutic dose. I tell people that, I say, look, you're not going to get a trophy if you get to the full dose right away.
Right.
You're not going to win. You're not going to.
100%.
I'm not sending you anything in the mail. I'm not sending you any gold bars or silver bars because you got to full dose on day 3. Like, look, take your time, start with the adrenals, get yourself feeling strong, get your sleep dialed in, make sure you're going to bed. If you're listening to this at 2 a.m., shut down the computer, get off your phone and go to bed. Come back and listen to this in the morning. Like, you've got to have sleep dialed in. I don't care how many adaptogenic herbs you take. If your sleep is crap, it's going to be tough to heal. There's a lot of detox and other things going on in the middle of the night that you just can't do if you're up all night and you're overworking. So if you're working 70 hours a week, you've got to fix that first. I talked to a guy yesterday who's a real estate salesman, and he's been fatigued for 10 years. His wife was on speakerphone with us, so it was kind of like a 3-way conversation. And she says, he comes home, he eats dinner at 6, and then he's passed out on the couch at 6:30. And she goes, and it's not a light sleep. She goes, this fool's sleeping for 3 hours, and then he gets up at 9 or 10 o'clock and he crawls into bed. I said, oh man, how long's this been going on for? And she says 10 years. This guy's been working 75 hours a week for a decade. I said, man, when's the last time you took a vacation? He goes, I have no idea. And then we, talk about sex drive. Of course, sex drive is gone, which usually happens with gut issues, but with that amount of stress. I'm like, so do you guys, do you have a relationship, sexual relationship? He's like, once in a blue moon. And of course, they're both not happy about that. I'm like, why don't you guys just schedule a 2 or 3 day weekend away somewhere? Why don't you guys take a trip somewhere and try to get that spark back in your life? And then look, man, why don't you hire a couple admins to help take off some of the load? Like, you're doing all this paperwork and stuff. Surely you can offload some of this to somebody so you can do only the expert task. And he's like, oh, what a great idea.
Yeah.
So like, this is the more practical stuff that I think people need to consider when they're working on this protocol, because everyone's busy. And if you're so busy, you can't heal. And that's why I'm taking the entire month of June off. By the time people are listening to this talk, this is going to be in July. And maybe you and I will chat and you'll say, Evan, you're crazy. Maybe you only need 2 weeks and I may come back on the clock. But the goal is at least a few weeks off, just because I want to try a full reset and see, okay, if I'm fully disconnected from the emails and the client care, what does that do for me? So I'm going to try it. So long story short, if you have stress, you have relationship issues, you're working too much, please address those issues as well as address the protocol stuff.
100%. I love it. And anyone listening to this, make sure you subscribe right now. Go over to CandidaSummit.com, CandidaSummit. We'll put the link below. We'll put some annotations on screen here. Make sure you subscribe, because this is going to be one interview out of 30. And I'm so pleased that I had the honor to interview you, because it's your summit. And it's just great that you are actually contributing to your summit. It's amazing. I know that you'll probably provide some of the most valuable information, because especially when it's happened to you and you're connected to it and you've seen improvements, I mean, how can you not be incredibly passionate about it?
Agreed. I know. I feel like you and I could chat for 3 hours, but we said we probably want to make it short and sweet, because then we give too much information and people have no clear action steps. So look, here's the deal too, for people listening. We spoke about this on Dr. J's interview on the Candida Summit as well. If you like what you hear, our interaction, our rapport that we have together, our conversational tone, we make functional medicine fun. That's like our tagline. McDonald's says like billions and billions served, open a box of happy or whatever, something crazy. Anyway, we make functional medicine fun. So if you like what you're hearing, this is only just a snippet of what we discuss. So please look up Justin Marchegiani, check him out. He's the man. I'm telling you, this guy's changed my life more than anyone over the last 5 years. I'm so, indebted and so grateful for our friendship and relationship. So please go look him up, go study him, subscribe on his YouTube. If you're not already, subscribe to the podcast, and him and I chat pretty much every week. So make sure that you're tuned in, because this is just the tip of the iceberg today. And then obviously make sure you're signed up for my podcast as well. And you're like, okay, I'm here for the summit. Why are you talking to me about this? Well, because look, you're not just going to hear this talk and magically everything's going to get improved in your life. This takes time. This takes repetition. Just like you're in the gym, you're not going to go hit biceps once and then your arms look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You've got to come back every week to the gym. So if you come back every week to us and you're finding one other little nuanced golden nugget that you can add into your health protocol, that's what it takes. It's repetition, 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 apply, learn, apply, learn. I could care less if you're impressed by the brain candy if you don't act on it. So that's the secret. And that's why I want you guys to subscribe to my Evan Brand podcast and Justin's podcast, because I believe you need a partner, an accountability partner, where you tune in once a week or once a month, whenever you can, and you get the knowledge and then you apply one little baby step. Maybe it's you change your job. Maybe it's you get rid of the toxic person in your life. Maybe it's you cut out the gluten-free brownies that you're eating, or you stop the kombucha for a little bit because maybe you've got excess fermentation and the kombucha makes you feel worse, but you didn't know it. That's the golden nuggets that we might not talk about here, but that can give you the significant improvement that you need.
That's phenomenal info. And I appreciate the flattery. That is very kind. And flattery will always get you everywhere with me, Evan, just so you know.
Well, hey, look, I got to keep it real. Like I said, there's a million people out there that I could learn from, but you have a really good way of taking complex things, breaking them into simple, actionable steps. And that's done so much for me personally, but clinically as well. So, I like tooting your horn, but I'm serious, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. And anyone listening to the summit, make sure you go over to evanbrand.com, because this conversation doesn't end just with the Candida Summit. And there's a lot of other topics that we'll get into down the road. And I want to just kind of pivot here to some of the herbs and the antimicrobials that you're using. I know you've kind of alluded to some earlier. I really want to lay it out, but I also want to put a caveat for listeners. It's really easy to be like, I got this bug, let me just hit these herbs. We kind of already gave you some caveats earlier, but just kind of remember, it's going to be always better to have a complete program set up, especially if there's already hormonal stressors or detox stressors, or maybe diagnosed autoimmune issues. You really want a comprehensive program to tie it in. So with that caveat, and again, Evan's available internationally, worldwide, I am as well. So if we want to dig in deeper, we're going to be some great guides or Sherpas, so to speak, to help you get to the top of the mountain. But Evan, let's just talk about some of your favorite herbs that you use and how you sequence them. And I know you have some that you formulated as well, so I want to go into those too.
Cool. Yeah. So like you mentioned, it's good to have a partner. I mean, we're biased. We think that we know enough to significantly help you. So we're going to say, hey, look, work with us because we've done this 1,000 times and our success rates are very high. Are there other practitioners out there that could probably help you? Of course, we're not against those. We're for anybody that helps you. I always say, look for a practitioner that's creating content. If they just have like a really pretty smile on their website, but they have no content, they're not regularly producing content, be questionable, because maybe they're stuck and they're stagnant in their protocols, where every week you and I are discussing what worked, what did not work. So that's the disclaimer. I've got 2 different formulas that I've used 1,000 times that work so good, called Microbiome Support 2, Microbiome Support 3. These are the formulas that I have that have a combination of herbs. So these are things like yarrow flower, hediotis, Kutch tree, which is a bark, Java brucea, which is a fruit, wormwood extract, which many people know wormwood for being an anti-parasitic, but it also can kill gram-positive bacteria, which are a lot of the bacteria we see on the stool test. Dill seed is in there as well. And then we've got the Microbiome Support 3, which I use for Candida every single day. And the Microbiome 3, this is olive leaf, this is stinging nettle root, this is Paul de Arco, which is a bark. Many people can drink Paul de Arco bark tea. That's great, but it's not going to work as good as a supplement extract. Thyme leaf is in there, French tarragon leaf, horsetail herb, and a few others. And this is kind of our antimicrobial / antifungal, because olive leaf, not only does it help with blood sugar, but it helps with viruses and it helps with fungi. So I use this protocol every single week. I told you before we got on the show, I said, man, can you believe the combination of herbs and how much stuff you can knock out across the board? So if we're talking parasites, bacteria, Candida all at once, if I run the Microbiome 2 and 3, 6 capsules a day, 2, 2, and 2, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Of course, we're doing the liver support, which is going to be something like my liver synergy. If we're doing an adrenal support, which there's many variations of that, plus digestive enzymes, We've got a really, really heavy hitting 1, 2, 3, 4 punch, and we're going to pretty much knock out all the bugs. And die off reactions are going to be pretty minimized because we're supporting adrenals, we're supporting liver, and then the herbs that we're using, they're potent, but they're not so potent that they're going to make you sick.
Love it. I mean, phenomenal information. I mean, where can you get this much information in 45-minute summit interview? So all the listeners, give us a thumbs up, give us a share right now, give us a like. You know, if you're writing somewhere where you have the ability to put comments, let us know your thoughts. We want to continue to provide better information, and this summit is an awesome platform to do so. Evan, is there anything else you wanted to add for the listeners here before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say don't give up. If you hear that there's a silver bullet, be skeptical of the silver bullet. Like if somebody says, hey, all of your problems are XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt it. I doubt it. It's always multifactorial. For me, it was adrenals, it was H. pylori, it was bacteria, it was candida, it was a bad circadian rhythm, it was working night shift when I was in college, it was excess stress, it was gluten that was previously in my diet, it was dairy that was in my diet, it was bad relationships, maybe toxic emotions from certain people I was taking on, it was obligations that I had on my plate that I should have gotten rid of. Like all that stuff was part of the protocol. So if you just said, Evan, it's candida, that would have been wrong because it wasn't. So make sure you get a good functional medicine practitioner on your team, get a good workup. If it's Justin, awesome. If it's me, awesome. If it's somebody else and they still give you the same success rate as us, awesome. I don't care who it is, but I want you to get better. And we're up against a lot. The healthcare system is collapsing on itself right now. But I believe with the functional medicine wave that we're riding right now, I believe we can turn this tide around. And it's a division of two systems. And I'm not saying ditch mainstream medicine. Like if you break your arm, like I thought I broke my arm like a few weeks ago, please go get the x-ray and see if your arm's broken or not, and then get help. But thank goodness I didn't break my arm. Justin helped me. He was like, I was in the back of the car driving to the urgent care, and Justin's like, hey, turn your hand this way, move your hand this way. Hey, can you put your arm up? He's like, okay, I don't think it's broken, but get it checked out anyway. So look, still do that stuff. But once you found out that your arm's not broken, then you got to get back to the functional medicine work. Check out your mitochondria, check out your liver, check out your gut, check out your adrenals, check out your thyroid. If you have autoimmune disease, take this stuff even more serious, Hashimoto's, etc., rheumatoid arthritis, if you've got alopecia, if you've got Sjogren's, I don't care what you've got autoimmune wise, you've got to do the work because you're not going to get a magic drug that's going to fix your autoimmune disease. You've got to address all of this stuff.
That is amazing. How does it feel to give the best summit interview in your own summit?
Hey, well, I think it was pretty good. It feels good. It feels good. I don't ever want to be like an all-knowing guru. I just want to tell people, look, I figured out enough to help a lot of people. I don't know everything. I never will, but I've learned enough to significantly move the needle, and I'm happy with that.
And I think one of the nice things that we've got a pretty good tag team going where we kind of feed off of each other, which is great. You help push me up, I help push you up in the interview and the content delivery process. And that's awesome. It creates momentum, and that momentum, the listeners get to benefit from that. So we're really excited.
Yeah, I get emails every week. Man, when you and Justin get together, it's the best. So, I mean, you and I kind of joke. It's like, okay, let's just never interview anybody else except each other because we have so much fun together. But then we may become stagnant. So we still interview and have a lot of good conversations with other practitioners. But yeah, I don't think there's anything like the energy that you and I have together. So once again, thank you so much. Thanks for interviewing me. Thanks for helping me out with this project.
You're so welcome, Evan. CandidaSummit.com. Subscribe. You get all 30 listeners. I'll be speaking in that as well. At evanbrand.com, available for consultations worldwide. And again, if you're on the fence and you're trying to figure out if you're a good fit, there are also some introductory consults there where you can get screened and see if you're ready for the next step.
Yeah, again, Justin, tell people about you as well, how people can keep up with you, study your work, etc.
So yeah, go to justinhealth.com, justinhealth.com. You'll see my podcast link there. Subscribe, my YouTube link, subscribe, get on my newsletter so you get all this information right at your fingertips. And if you need to reach out to me, if Evan's a better fit for you personality-wise, go with Evan or go with me. If you feel like you're a better fit, see what's best for you. The most important thing is it's got to be in alignment with you and how it's going to, that way you're going to be the most compliant and you're going to be on track. But either way, you can't go wrong. And I'm so excited to be part of this, and make sure everyone just shares it with someone so this information gets out there. Our goal is to help millions of people, and we cannot do it alone. Everyone listening plays a small part in that, and we really appreciate the listeners. So thanks so much, everyone, and have a phenomenal day.
Take care.
Bye.